Have you ever been there? That place where you're so stuck, so lost, that starting over just feels impossible? Well, today we're going to dive into this incredible poetic screenplay that gets right to the heart of that feeling. It's this beautiful metaphor for what it really takes to find a new beginning when your life feels like it's been shattered into a million pieces.
And it all kicks off with this one word, whispered in the dark, početak, which is Serbian for beginning. Seriously, that's it. This one word is the key that unlocks this whole profound story about, breaking through that feeling of being frozen, facing your past, and finding that hidden path to starting fresh. It really sets the tone for a story that I think we can all connect with.
All right, so let's get into it. Our journey starts with the main character, a man who's just called A. And A, well, he's basically all of us. He represents anyone who's ever felt totally stuck, trapped in that state of paralysis after something big, some huge loss.
So picture this. It's a really stark scene. An empty, dusty room, there's just one lamp, and there's A, sitting in front of a totally blank piece of paper. And the first thing he does, it's not to write a story. He just draws a circle. And then he puts his own initial, A, right inside it. It's like he's literally trapping himself, right? He's saying, I am the beginning, but he can't actually begin anything.
Okay, so here's what's super interesting about this whole thing. The characters, they aren't really people. They're more like allegories, right? They're the internal forces that A is wrestling with inside his own head. So you've got A, he's the seeker. Then there's E, who's this wise old woman figure. And then there's Uzak, a really shadowy character who's basically the personification of A's painful, tormented past. So now that we've met the players, let's get into A's struggle. Because for him, moving forward isn't like walking down a clear path. Nope, it's more like trying to solve this messy, fragmented puzzle made up of letters that just don't make any sense.
So what we start to see are the letters of that Serbian word for beginning, početak, but they're just scattered, disconnected. First we see the P, and then an O. And these letters, they aren't helping. They're actually torturing Uzi, that shadow of the past, who's desperately trying and failing to put them in any kind of order.
Next up is Ch. You can really see how this visual chaos is a perfect mirror for what's going on inside A's head. He's got all the pieces for a new start right there, but it all just feels like noise.
And then E, it gets worse. As Uzi tries to grab the letters, they just poof, vanish into thin air. It's such a great way to show how the past can feel, right? So elusive and maddening when you're trying to make sense of it to build something new.
Then T. And you start to realize the struggle here isn't just about getting the order right. It's about how overwhelming the pieces themselves are. Every single one is like a memory, a little fragment of a life that's been completely dismantled. Then his own initial A shows up. It's a piece of the puzzle, but he can't even integrate himself into it. Each letter is just a thought, a piece of his own story that he just can't seem to put back together to make a new beginning. And finally, we get the K. And this whole sequence just leaves you with this deep, profound feeling of being totally lost, just drifting in the wreckage of a life that doesn't make any sense anymore. And that really brings us to the core question of this whole story. And it's a feeling I think we've all had at some point, right? How in the world do you start over when the very building blocks of your life feel like they're just broken and scattered everywhere? So right when everything seems hopeless, a guide shows up. This is where we meet E, that voice of wisdom we talked about. And what's so important here is that she doesn't just hand A the answer. No, she gives him a clue. And E's wisdom comes in this kind of cryptic but really powerful statement. She tells him, yeah, the beginning is in a letter, but it's not the first one you see. It's not where he's been looking this whole time. And that one little piece of advice just completely flips his entire approach on its head. See, she doesn't point him to the first letter of the word početak. She points him all the way to the sixth letter. And this is the key takeaway, right? The real starting point, the thing that actually sparks the change, is so often hidden in plain sight. It's almost never right there at the beginning. And this distinction is absolutely critical. The obvious place to start would be P, right? The first letter of početak, but that's a dead end. The true turning point is that sixth letter, T. And get this, in Serbian, T is the first letter of a phrase, tačka prekoračaja, which literally means the point of reversal. So the beginning of the word isn't the beginning of the journey. The turning point is. So, armed with this totally new way of looking at things, Aaron's whole quest just changes, dramatically. He stops trying to solve this external puzzle and starts going on an internal journey to find his own center.
And his big breakthrough, his epiphany, it happens in 4 steps. First, he just stops obsessing over those scattered letters. Then, he finds a center, not in a whole word, but inside the single letter O. Third, he finally truly faces UZ, his past. And finally, he looks inside himself.
And this is probably the most powerful moment in the whole screenplay. A looks into that circle of the letter O, and instead of seeing some terrifying shadow, he sees Uza as a crystal clear reflection of himself. Suddenly, his past isn't this separate thing that's tormenting him anymore. It's just a part of him, a recognizable part of who he is.
And that's when the voice of Uzi, the voice of his own past, becomes clear for the very first time. And it delivers the story's core message. Forget the letters, look inside. And that's it. That's the moment of acceptance. The struggle is finally over.
And you know how it goes, right? This huge internal shift leads to an immediate, real-world change on the outside. This is where we see it in action. How true renewal always starts from within.
Just think back to where we started. Remember? Ashay was in that totally empty room. A perfect metaphor for how he felt inside, just paralyzed, staring at a blank page he had no idea how to fill.
But now, after his breakthrough, A opens his eyes, and the room isn't empty anymore. There's a glass of water on the table. I mean, it's such a small, subtle change, but it means everything. It's a symbol for the return of life, of substance, of potential.
And those very same letters that were torturing him before, now they form a map of his transformation. T was the turning point that started it all. UZ is the past that he's finally accepted. E is the wisdom that showed him the way. And A is himself, finally whole and ready to actually start again.
The story wraps up with this just beautiful, hopeful image. A gets up, walks out of that lonely room, and steps into a sunlit street that's just buzzing with people in life. Because he found his inner center, because he made peace with his past, he can finally rejoin the world.
So, this incredible metaphorical story leaves all of us with a really powerful question to think about. We all have those times, right, when we feel completely stuck, when nothing seems to fit together. And what this story suggests is that maybe, just maybe, the answer isn't out there, in frantically trying to rearrange all the broken pieces. Maybe it's about looking for that hidden turning point, deep inside ourselves. So the question is, where's yours?